Welcome to the deep dive. We love to take these deep dives into fascinating materials, and today's no different. You sent us this presentation by Dr. Boustani from Indiana University,
Yeah,
and it's all about agile storytelling. And this is really aimed at those agile change conductors out there.
absolutely. And Dr. Boustani, he doesn't just stick to agile methodologies. I mean, he brings in psychology, marketing, a little philosophy even.
Yeah.
It's like he's giving us the cheat codes to human behavior.
Yeah, exactly. So Dr. Boustani starts off, and he just dismantles this idea that we all have, that facts alone can persuade people.
Right.
And to do this, he uses Lisa Cron's book, Story or Die, which,
Oh yeah, great book.
I'm sure.
It's so interesting, she basically says our brains, they're wired for stories, not like, spreadsheets and data.
Yeah.
So even when you give people the hard facts, they tend to like cling to these beliefs that fit their own stories, their own narratives. It's like we've got this internal storytelling machine that just filters everything to like confirm what we already think.
So for the agile change conductors out there, you're hitting wall, you've got the data,
Yeah.
but people are resisting.
Uh-huh.
This could be why.
Totally. And Dr. Boustani, he tells this great story about how he was preparing this presentation,
Yeah.
just loaded with data, and his wife, she was like, "Hey,
Too smart lady.
there's no p-value in the boardroom."
That's a quote to remember.
Right? I love that.
So what happened? I mean, how did she help him?
So instead of just drowning the audience with numbers, she was like, focus on one person's experience.
Yeah.
And he did. He tapped into that power of emotion,
Right.
connected with the audience.
Yeah.
And guess what? Got the funding for his project.
Wow. It's amazing what a little shift can do.
It is.
So he goes on to talk about different kinds of facts.
Yep.
And how they affect decisions.
Uh-huh. He actually pulls from Cron again. She talks about 4 types of facts, right? You got natural facts, those are the ones we kind of ignore, they're just not relevant to us. And then warning facts, those signal danger.
Right.
But, think Boy Who Cried Wolf. A lot of false positives there.
Yeah.
Then you've got validating facts. Those are the ones we love, right?
Of course.
They confirm our beliefs, feed that confirmation bias.
Yeah.
And finally, the ones we hate, conflicting facts. They challenge what we believe and we just reject them.
Yeah. Makes you wonder, if we're like hardwired to resist stuff that challenges our beliefs,
Yeah.
how do we change anything? I mean, how do we get people on board with new ideas?
Well, that's where Dr. Boustani brings in this idea of social capital. He's saying that, good storytelling, that's how you turn strangers into like fans, advocates for your cause.
So it's not just about the information, it's about like building these relationships and creating a shared story.
Exactly. And he lays out this process. You got to convert strangers to visitors, then leads, customers, and finally fans.
Yeah.
And each step has its own conversion rate. And that first jump, stranger to visitor,
Yeah.
he says it can be as low as like 1 in 12,000.
Wow. That's a big jump. I mean, so building a following for change, it's tough.
Yeah, it takes persistence, and you got to know your audience, like really know how to connect.
Yeah.
Which actually brings us to Dr. Boustani's ideas about creating new social norms.
Okay.
He says boils down to 3 things. The message itself, right? How you say it. Then the behavior of the messenger, so like who's delivering the message. And then the big one, the behavior of the community.
So the messenger has the most control over crafting the message.
Right.
But it's the community that really drives that lasting change.
Exactly.
Makes sense, right? We're all influenced by the people around us.
Yeah. It's like that saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Dr. Boustani doesn't want us to feel powerless. He introduces this concept of agile storytelling,
Right.
which is a way to spread solutions, evidence-based solutions.
Yes. And he breaks it down into 3 core elements. Developing what he calls minimally viable stories, which are like these concise, powerful narratives that get the core message across. Then creating minimally viable personas.
Right.
So tailoring the messenger's image, their style, so they resonate with the audience. And then finally, minimally viable experiments or, think like sprints.
Gotcha.
So testing, refining both the story, the persona through these little experiments.
So it's like treating your change initiative like a startup. You know, you're always testing, iterating, adapting based on like real feedback.
Exactly. And Dr. Boustani, he goes even deeper, right?
Yeah.
He dissects what makes a story compelling.
Okay, let's hear it. What are the key ingredients here?
So first, you gotta have struggle. You gotta clearly define the problem,
Right.
the challenge. Then you gotta have drama. That's where you bring in the vivid details.
Yeah.
The imagery, evoke those emotions, get people's attention.
You got to grab them, make them want to lean in.
Exactly. Then comes the villain. Gotta identify that root cause. Could be a person, policy, system, even, like a disease. And finally, you need a hero. Present someone relatable.
Yeah.
Who overcomes that struggle, embodies the change you're going for.
It's like that classic story arc, right? Movies, books, we've seen it.
It works.
Yeah.
But how do you apply all this to agile change?
Yeah.
What advice does Dr. Boustani have for change conductors like, our listener?
Well, he really digs into understanding your audience's empathy.
Yeah.
You got to develop these detailed personas, go beyond just like basic demographics, really understand who they are, what matters to them, their fears, their aspirations.
And you got to see the world through their eyes. Exactly. And he stresses like clear language, keep it simple, honor the past, acknowledge people's beliefs, lay out a clear mandate for change, but keep it optimistic, show that path forward.
So it's not just telling any story, it's telling the right story.
Yes.
In the right way.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Dr. Boustani, he says, presenters need to embrace their own emotions. Like, authenticity is key.
Yeah, people can spot a fake a mile away. You got to believe in what you're saying.
Exactly. He says, instead of trying to be, like, super optimistic all the time, tap into those other emotions. Frustration, anger, disappointment, devotion, regret. That's all part of being human.
Yeah, you're letting the audience see you, the real you.
Right. Being vulnerable. It is, right. It's about letting them in, showing them you're human, too.
Yeah.
And Dr. Boustani, he actually points out, like, emotions, they're contagious.
Yeah.
Your mood as a leader spreads like wildfire through the team.
That's a powerful thought. We got to be mindful of our own emotional state, especially when we're, leading people through change.
Right.
But going back to the storytelling for a sec, I'm curious about those universal plots he talked about.
Oh, yeah. He mentions, like, the classics, fear of abandonment, sibling rivalry, good versus evil.
Yeah.
That hero's journey.
Those resonate with us, like on a deep level.
They do. And he says, don't reinvent the wheel, leverage those pre-existing pathways to emotional engagement.
So we're tapping into these familiar narratives that already have a hold on us.
Exactly. He also brings in this principle from behavioral economics.
Okay.
It's called appeal small, not big.
What does that mean?
So, like, a story about one person who's struggling, that's way more powerful than, some statistic about 1 million people.
Right.
It goes back to his wife's advice, right?
Yeah.
No p-value in the boardroom. Data is important,
Yeah.
but stories, that's how we connect as humans.
It's like that saying, a single death is a tragedy, 1 million deaths is a statistic.
Exactly. And then he gives us some other nudges, he calls them,
Okay.
for effective storytelling.
So these are like techniques to subtly influence how the message comes across.
Yeah, like, for example, he says, mention that other people are already on board with the change.
Okay, so kind of like showing there's momentum, that it's not just some like fringe idea.
Exactly. It builds credibility, that sense of like inevitability.
Yeah.
He also says, frame your message in hope, not hopelessness.
That fits the agile mindset, right? Like iterative progress, embracing challenges.
Totally. And then he reminds us about the peak end bias.
Okay.
Which basically means people remember experiences based on how they felt at the most intense moment and at the very end.
So if you want to leave them feeling good, end on a high note.
Exactly. Then he shifts to the messenger, right?
Oh, yeah.
The person delivering the story, he's like, look, they got to be motivated, passionate about the change.
Passion's contagious.
Yeah.
If you don't believe it, why should anyone else?
Right. And that leads to another point. Understanding your audience, like, deeply. He actually he encourages us to go beyond those those traditional method like surveys.
Yeah.
He says engage in ethnography.
Ethnography.
Yeah.
And that sounds a little academic.
It's about like immersing yourself in the audience's world, observing them firsthand, understanding their motivations.
So it's not just like reading about a culture in a book.
No.
It's actually living in it.
Exactly. And then he goes on to say, honor the past, like when you're bringing in change.
Yeah.
Gotta be sensitive to those who might resist, acknowledge what they might be losing.
Change can be scary, right?
It is.
Got to meet people where they are.
Absolutely. He also stresses having a clear mandate for change, like a compelling reason why this change is necessary.
So connecting back to his point about that human goal, something that matters. People need to understand how this change will benefit them.
Right. And then when it comes to actually communicating the change, he says, be authentic, clear, humble.
No ego tripping allowed.
Exactly. And he says, lay out that path forward, make it rigorous but optimistic, use the data, but also, leverage that emotional connection.
So it's like that balance between head and heart, logic and emotion.
Exactly. And he makes this bold statement. Emotions, they're a leader's most effective tool. And he even says, don't be afraid to go beyond just optimism.
Wait, so he's saying show vulnerability.
He is. He's saying, those other emotions, the frustration, the anger, the disappointment, devotion, regret.
Yeah.
They ground us.
Yeah.
They make us more real, more relatable. He pushes back on that phrase, it's not personal, he says in the workplace, especially when people's jobs are on the line, everything's personal.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, he's calling out that whole dehumanizing aspect of some work cultures,
right?
And urging us to be real, to be authentic. But what about those workplaces where showing emotion it's seen as unprofessional or even weak?
He gets that. He says in healthcare, for example, emotions are often suppressed.
Yeah.
But he reminds us, dialectical behavior therapy teaches us the only thing we can really accept about someone without evidence is their emotion.
Yeah, you can't argue someone out of feeling a certain way.
Right.
Emotions are valid, even if we don't understand them.
Exactly. And so he's saying, acknowledge your emotions, accept them, accept other people's emotions, and even incorporate a range of emotions into your storytelling. It makes it more nuanced, more relatable for the audience.
So be real. Let yourself feel the full spectrum and let that come through in how you communicate.
Yes. He really believes that by embracing those emotions, we become more authentic, more relatable leaders.
I'm seeing how it all connects, the storytelling, the empathy, the authenticity. It's like Dr. Boustani's giving us this recipe for creating real, meaningful change.
He is, but there's this one point he makes. He says, don't picture your audience as part of your tribe. See them as part of theirs.
I don't know if I follow.
Okay, so when you're proposing a change, especially as an outsider, you're asking people to shift their tribal allegiance.
Right.
You're asking them to leave behind what's familiar, embrace something new.
Okay, that adds a whole other layer of complexity to it.
It does. And he reminds us, we got to understand their beliefs, the values of that tribe we're trying to reach. We got to frame our message so it fits with their worldview.
So it's not about forcing our beliefs on them. It's about showing them how this change, how it aligns with what they already value.
Exactly. He emphasizes understanding those benefits, what they get from how they're doing things now, the beliefs that they hold dear.
We have to acknowledge what they might be giving up to get on board with this change.
Yes, and we got to frame it so they see, how it helps them become their most authentic selves.
Right.
How it lines up with their values, their aspirations.
That's a tall order.
It is, but Dr. Boustani's insights, they give us a way to navigate all that.
Okay, so what other advice does he have for crafting that compelling story?
He says, think about your call to action, right? The specific change you want.
Yeah.
How does that benefit the audience based on their worldview?
So not what we think is best.
Right.
But what resonates with them.
Exactly. And he encourages us to actually address those beliefs head on that might clash with the change.
Right.
Instead of avoiding those tough questions, tackle them.
Be transparent, be honest.
Exactly.
This is giving me so much to think about. I feel like we've just scratched the surface of Dr. Boustani's ideas. What can we leave our listeners with today? What's that one thing we want them to remember?
I think the key takeaway here is facts alone, they don't change minds. Stories do. If you want to make real change, you got to master that art of agile storytelling.
Beautifully put. And on that note, little challenge for you, dear listeners. Think about something in your life you'd like to see change, whether it's at work, in your community, even within yourself. Now build a story around that change. A story that taps into those universal plots we talked about, brings out the emotion, and resonates with your audience's values. Then go out there and share it. You might be surprised by the impact you can have. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.